Welcome back to Only Talk Sports. We talk sports every single day, or at least we try to. I'm Ernest Jeffrey. Subscribe to the channel if you like sports content. Hit that notification bell so you never miss our video. Big Monday in college basketball has got a good game coming up at 7 o'clock on ESPN, and that is with the Duke Blue Devils traveling to a place that has given them some woes in recent years, and that's Blacksburg, Virginia, and the Virginia Tech Hokies. This game right here on paper, you would say, oh, the Duke Blue Devils, they're a far superior team than the Virginia Tech Hokies. They should be able to take care of business, but that has not been the case in recent years, because if you look at what the Virginia Tech Hokies have done in the last few meetings with the Duke Blue Devils, they have both won 3 matchups, and the Virginia Tech Hokies have won the last 2 times against the Duke Blue Devils when they were in Blacksburg. And I know a lot of people do not think of Virginia Tech as one of the better home environments in college basketball, because there are so many great arenas that are far superior, including the Duke Blue Devils, Indiana, North Carolina, Kentucky, Kansas. It goes on and on. But Virginia Tech is an underrated college basketball environment, especially when a team like the Duke Blue Devils or the North Carolina Tar Heels are coming to town. And with this game being nationally televised on ESPN on Big Monday, you know the Virginia Tech student section is going to show out, and that place is going to be packed. And the Duke Blue Devils, again, having slipped up the last 2 times in Blacksburg, Virginia Tech, you know, is going to play very hard and do everything that they possibly can to beat the Duke Blue Devils for the 3rd time in a row on their own floor. And the FBI predictor reflects what I'm thinking. This is going to be a close game. Duke is favored to win by the metrics, but it's only by a 62.6% percentage, whereas Virginia Tech is around a 37.5% chance to win. So Virginia Tech definitely has a shot to knock off the Duke Blue Devils. Now, Duke is a very talented team, and they have had a really good season so far. Their record is 15-4, and they're 6-2 so far in the ACC, so they're not too far behind the North Carolina Tar Heels, who are currently atop the ACC standings. And you see that Duke has lost to Arizona in the non-conference. That's a tough loss, but Arizona has been a good team this year, slipped up a bit lately, but still not a bad loss. But they bounced back and beat Michigan State, who is struggling this season. But they've already lost to Arkansas on the road, and they lost at Georgia Tech as well. And neither of those teams are playing all that well. Arkansas is about a 500 team, and Georgia Tech is toward the bottom of the ACC standings. Yes, both of those games were on the road, but that is not a great look for the Duke Blue Devils, especially considering you're talking about them now traveling on the road to Virginia Tech, a team that is superior to Arkansas and definitely superior to Georgia Tech. I know Duke, this is later in the season, so they're probably a better team now than they were then, but if you are the Virginia Tech Hokies, that is very encouraging that Duke has slipped up already on the road against inferior competition a few times this year. Duke did knock off the Baylor Bears. That was a quality non-conference win, but after that, Duke's gotten a lot of wins over average ACC teams. They beat Syracuse, knocked off Notre Dame on the road, beat Pitt, Georgia Tech. Then they lost to Pittsburgh at home, surprisingly. Jeff Capel was able to beat the team he used to be an assistant coach for. That was huge for them. Then they won at Louisville, and then barely squeaked out a win against Clemson on their own floor. Clemson's a good team this year, but Duke's showing some cracks. Even though they are probably a better team now than they were at the beginning of the year, they're still not consistently putting out great performances. But like I said earlier, Duke, the roster's not a problem. And the one thing that makes this team better than the Duke teams that have played at Virginia Tech the last couple of years and lost is that Duke has more veterans, something they usually do not have. Kyle Filipowski's a sophomore, and he is a fantastic one, averaging 18 points, 9 boards. He can knock down jump shots. He's got all the moves in the paint. He's a really good player. He can hit free throws. Definitely one of the best players in the ACC and the best player for the Duke Blue Devils. Jeremy Roach, he's been at Duke for several years now. That's helping out Jon Scheyer, replaced Mike Krzyzewski as head coach the last couple seasons. Having a guy that has not left for the NBA, a guy that's talented enough to probably test the draft waters and try out the NBA, but he stayed in Durham, North Carolina, and that has paid dividends last few seasons for Duke. He's averaging 14 points per game, but that experience is just making Duke a better team. Mark Mitchell's another guy that didn't go pro last year, and he is not a freshman as well. He's averaging 12 points and 6 boards. That's awesome for the Duke Blue Devils that they're leading scorers for once, like the Kentucky Wildcats always are. It's not freshmen this time for Duke. They have some guys that have been in college basketball before. Jaron McCain, Tyrese Proctor, Caleb Foster, those are the younger guys, but they're playing very well, very talented players. Ron Young, the transfer from Northwestern, always chips in some tough defense, and he can get you some buckets down low. So the Duke Blue Devils have a very balanced team. They're a great free throw shooting team. They can knock down threes. This is a very good squad. But then over on the Virginia Tech side, Mike Young, the head coach there, he's had some up and down moments replacing Buzz Williams as the Virginia Tech head coach. But they've been a competitive team the last few years. They made the NCAA tournament under his watch before. And this season, they are fighting for an NCAA tournament berth again. Who knows whether they're going to be able to make it or not. But getting a big win over Duke would definitely help out the Hokies' chances. They lost to South Carolina in the non-conference, but that was not too bad of a loss because the Gamecocks are having a pretty solid year. Beating Boise State's a good win. Boise State's a really good team in the Mountain West this year, and the biggest win Virginia Tech already has on the resume is a win over Iowa State. The Cyclones just knocked off Kansas, so that win is definitely aging well for Virginia Tech. They lost to Florida Atlantic and Auburn, and the loss to Florida Atlantic was by a lot, but still not too bad because both those teams are really good. Then they started rattling off wins against bad teams, and then they lost to Wake Forest and Florida State on the road. Neither of those losses are all that good, especially the Florida State loss, but still it's not too bad on the resume because they were on the road. And then they beat Clemson at home, so it's showing you that home environment for Virginia Tech can help them out in big games. Then they lost to Miami at home, couldn't beat them. Then they lost at Virginia, beat NC State on the road, beat Boston College and Georgia Tech at home. So Virginia Tech, even though they did lose to Miami at home, they normally are able to win their home games. They do struggle more on the road. And like I said, with Duke coming to town, it's going to be a great environment in the game. And looking at Virginia Tech's roster, they've got good players. This is a great free throw shooting team like the Duke Blue Devils, and they also knock down their threes. Duke's better at not turning the ball over than Virginia Tech. The Hokies do turn it over more, but still they aren't one of the worst turnover-prone teams in college basketball. They do a good enough job of not making too many mistakes in that department. Sean Pedulla and Hunter Couture, both those guys have been at Virginia Tech for a couple seasons. They're really good players, averaging 16 points and 14 points respectively. Lynn Kidd's been chipping in at the center position, 14 points per game and 7 boards. He's playing well. Tyler Nickel, the transfer from the North Carolina Tar Heels, never got playing time for them. He transferred to the Hokies, averaging 9 points per game. He's having a good season. Robbie Barron, the Northwestern transfer, is averaging 5.5 points per game. So Virginia Tech has done a good job of adding a couple of quality transfers in the portal that has made their team better than they would have been if they didn't add them. So that was smart by Mike Young. So who do I think is going to win this big Monday game in the ACC? The Duke Blue Devils, they're the more talented team. That's not the problem. If you're basing it off of talent alone, then I would easily pick the Duke Blue Devils to win this game. But going off of history, Virginia Tech has won the last 2 games over the Duke Blue Devils in Blacksburg, Virginia. They've got a really good home environment when they are facing top teams, especially. Mike Young always has his squads being very gritty and they're tough. The Blue Devils have already lost to inferior opponents on the road like Georgia Tech. So I do believe that the Duke Blue Devils are vulnerable in that department. They've got a more experienced team with guys like Kyle Filipowski, Mark Mitchell, and Jeremy Roach, which I think will help them in a situation like this. But because Virginia Tech really needs a big win to keep themselves on the right side of the NCAA tournament conversation, and the fact they've knocked off the Duke Blue Devils the last 2 times on their own floor, and they've got a well-coached squad that plays very hard, and they're probably one of the most underrated teams in the ACC, I believe that the Virginia Tech Hokies are going to make it 3 for 3 the last 3 times at home against the Duke Blue Devils, and they're going to win 73-70 over the Blue Devils for Virginia Tech to get their best win of the season. Duke's going to play very hard in this game, and I believe that both teams are going to shoot very well at the free throw line and the 3-point line, but down the stretch, Virginia Tech's going to make the clutch plays, and they're going to knock down their free throws when Duke fouls them to try to stay in the game, and that's a really quality thing to have when you are a great free throw shooting team. Virginia Tech's going to take care of business in that department, and their home crowd is going to be just enough for the Virginia Tech Hokies to knock off the Duke Blue Devils on Big Monday. This should be a fantastic game. But let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below about whether you think that the Duke Blue Devils will go on the road and knock off the Virginia Tech Hokies on Big Monday for the first time in several seasons, or whether you believe that Virginia Tech will beat the Duke Blue Devils 3 times in a row and for the Hokies to get their biggest win of the season to help their NCAA tournament resume out. Subscribe to the channel if you like sports content. content, like this video down below. Follow me on Twitter as well. Link is in the description, and I'll see you next time.